Yeah, we're
really intelligent.
I didn't hear that. I'm sure it's really nice.
Let's roll the drive.
Okay. Thanks so very much, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for coming, everybody. Thanks for coming, everyone. A big welcome to everyone. Thank you very much indeed. It's brilliant to have you all. As said, this is really a thank you. I want to say a thank you to the team, and I want to say a thank you to all of you as trustees, as supporters, as just members who help us in lots and lots of different ways. So it's really a bit of a thank you, a bit of a look at what we've done over the year, which has involved many of you in many different ways, and we couldn't have done it without you. And also it's a thank you to the team. They were really keen to talk, but I do really appreciate it that you all have come. I really appreciate it, because it's all very well me saying, yeah, we've done loads of stuff, but I definitely haven't done it. I've sat at my desk and you guys have done everything. So this is really a thank you to everybody. And looking at all the team, we haven't got everyone here, but for those online, we've got this strange person on the, if we start the left top hand corner, that's me, Esther Bertram. And then going along, we've got Caroline Weir. So we're going from the top left to the right, Caroline Weir, and then we've got Fryn Ross, and then moving along with lots of albatross in the background is Sarah Crofts. And then we've got Sorrel Pomper Robertson at the far right at the top. And then going back to the left under the red person, Esther, we've got Andrew Stanworth. And then we go across past the words to the right to Emma Hart and Jenny Soul. And then we go back like we're reading a book to the guy who's climbing, some kooky looking kind of a guy. So that's Mark McLeod, and then to the right we've got Pammy Helves, and then we've got on the far right we've got someone eating a hot noodle, which has got to be Dave Higgins. And then bottom left we've got Hannah, who's supporting us as a volunteer, which is fabulous, from the UK, from Bournemouth University. And then we've got John and Alison Barton out on New Island. And then we've got Alicia, who works for us, Alicia Boyer, who works for us in the UK. And then we've got Helen Marsh, who is our wonderful, another volunteer. And then we've got Grant on the far right at the bottom. So I think that's everyone. So I'd just like to say thank you to all for putting up with me, for being fabulous. I really appreciate all that you do, and I really enjoy working with you. And then to our trustees for all the work that you've put in once again this year, supporting us, giving advice, generally keeping everything, ensuring that we're not doing anything too crazy, which is a job in itself. So I appreciate that. So moving on from the team, the super team, I'm then going to hand over to Caroline Weir, who's going to just say a couple of words about the work that she's been doing. Thank you, Caroline.
Hi everyone. So we were asked to speak about the highlights of our year. Obviously, one of the main highlights for my year was getting the Key Biodiversity Area designated for the sei whales. And this is kind of the result of 5 years of work now on sei whale research in the Falkland Islands, starting back in 2017 and completing this year. Well, actually, we're going on for another 3 years, but Andy will speak about that afterwards. So the Key Biodiversity Area is an internationally recognised area of global biodiversity, and it has to be nominated using a set of scientific criteria and using at least 3 years of data. So we needed a long-term data set on the distribution and the abundance of sei whales and the habitat modelling to take those data and predict where they might occur in areas where we haven't surveyed. And we've ended up with this big kind of the whole expanse actually of inshore waters around the Falklands, out to 100 metres water depth. And we put this forward to the KBA committee. There were some stakeholder workshops here, unfortunately during the COVID pandemic last year, so we didn't get quite the attendance we wanted to in terms of in-person consultation, but we did it all on the internet really, via a webinar and email exchanges. And it's progressed all the way through now to completion, which is a major milestone for us, and it's actually the first KBA to be designated for sei whales anywhere globally. So really highlights the importance of the Falkland Islands and the environment that we have here for this whale species, which is still globally endangered and very little known about anywhere else in the world actually. So this area is really important for feeding sei whales in the summer and autumn, and it's now being recognised very much by the international community as being an important area, and the research is getting quite a lot of interest now. So I think in terms of, you know, marine conservation and management going forward, having the KBA designated for sei whales really highlights the area as being important for government as well, and in terms of looking at impacts for offshore industry and aquaculture, those kind of things that are coming in. This KBA will serve as a tool really to say this whole area is pretty important for sei whales and they should be taken into account in those processes, in the environmental impact assessments going forward for new activities that are happening in the area. Oh, Esther. Oh, hang on.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, so the only other thing I wanted to mention was some scientific publications. This is a little bit dry, I'm sorry for that, but again, it's the culmination of several years of work now, and publishing data on whales, it takes a lot of effort actually, and a lot of persistence. So this first paper that we had published this year was the results of an abundance survey on the west side of the Falklands back in 2018. And this has really underpinned the Key Biodiversity Area application. And I don't think we would have got the KBA without having this paper published in scientific literature that really said something about the numbers of animals here, around about 900 or so sei whales just over there on the west side. So you can probably multiply that up by the whole of the Falklands and end up with, you know, a few thousand animals, which is pretty significant. So this was used very much in the KBA application. And then we've also, this one is a little bit of an intimidating title, but it results from the suction cup tags that we deployed on 2 sei whales. 2019, I guess it was now. We weren't sure if we would get any of these tags on the whales, and in the end we managed to get 2 on. And the data that have come back have just given us some information about how whales are using their environment, the water depths that they're going down to, and the way that they're feeding. And what we've learned is that sei whales, they have several different types of feeding behaviour. So at the surface lunging, skimming, which is just filtering like you would see with a basking shark or a whale shark, and subsurface lunging. And because they're behaving in all these different ways, it makes them ecologically quite flexible. So it means they can take different prey species and perhaps feed on prey densities that are lower than your humpback might use. And it also has different implications for how they might interact with human activities. So if the whales are spending a lot of time at the surface, skim feeding and doing surface lunging, they're obviously a lot more prone to being hit by boats, let's say, or other sort of impacts like that. So we're hoping to take that forward in terms of management implications as well. The final paper was one that went to the International Whaling Commission, and that was on the other species of whale that we're working on, which is the southern right whale. And the last 2 years of our Darwin Plus project, we've learned a lot more about these animals and what they're doing in the Falklands. They seem to be here for mating and courtship, socialising behaviour in the middle of winter. And this was presented to the International Whaling Commission and has really put the Falklands on the map as a unique sort of southern hemisphere wintering ground for southern right whales. And again, there's a lot of interest in this going forward in the international community. And there's a conservation management plan in existence at the IWC for the Southwest Atlantic right whale, and currently it doesn't mention the Falklands at all. So the point of getting this paper out there this year was to, you know, really push and say, well, they're here as well, and let's get involved with that CMP going forward. So that's just a summary of some of the whale highlights of the year.
Brilliant. Great. So now we're going to hand over to Andy, who oversees all this different projects.
Yeah, so it's another Key Biodiversity Area update really, but I'm standing in for Emma Hart, who's our Marine Conservation Officer. She's been leading on this project. It's a partnership with BirdLife International, who are involved in the KBA Secretariat and have quite a bit of experience in doing KBAs. So as Emma's not here, I will keep it fairly brief, but essentially we've not gone out and gathered the data in the same way that Caroline has. There's not an enormous amount of data, but there is quite a bit of data out there existing for seabirds in the island. So this was an exercise in collating as much of the information we could find from all kinds of sources, some that's tracking data, some that's people's observations of where colonies are, other ones are some like a lot of Sally Ponce's work, which from yacht trips, doing island visits and surveys. And we collated as much of the information as we could. And then we ran it effectively in the same way as Caroline's work against the criteria that the key biodiversity areas need to meet in order to be designated. What we found was that there were 9 Falklands seabirds. I'm not going to go into them all or the complexities of how they all differentially qualify, but some qualify on whether they're a threatened species, and there's not, as many of those, or some whether it's a percentage of the global population, or some whether it's a percentage of an endemic population. So they qualified under 3 different criteria, but there were 9 that qualified, and you can see here is the proposed KBAs. So there's quite a large inshore sort of KBA coverage there, which was for the endemic steamer duck, and then there's other ones. The yellow and green and blue areas are kind of overlaid areas that qualified under multiple species, and those are mostly due to very large colonies of, say, albatross or giant petrel or prions. So these sites where we know we have very large population numbers that are using the inshore adjacent to their colonies. So again, as Caroline said, it needed to be nominated. It's gone to the KBA Secretariat, and we're anticipating that being designated, or the areas being designated, and then what will happen is that those data layers will be incorporated into the inshore layer that Caroline's already had identified for sei whales. So again, it's a decision-making tool. This is not, I mean, 9 seabirds qualify, but I mean, there's a lot of seabird species and colonies that we don't have information for in the Falklands, some that we have absolutely no data on, to be frank. So one of the two of the key take-homes from this really are that if we can get the data on taxa of different types of species, whether it's seabirds, whether it's cetaceans, or whether it's other things, it doesn't take much to recognise the globally significant value of what we have here. If you look, you will find that we've got incredibly important populations of a whole range of species, be it cetaceans or seabirds or pinnipeds or probably benthos in the islands. And the second point to that is that, with that in mind, and knowing that the more we look, the more we will find, it is absolutely critical that we recognise the significance of these important areas, in particular the inshore environment, in terms of underpinning the majority of our globally important biodiversity and our economy. So it's been a short project, only 1.5 years, and as I said, it didn't collect data, it took data and analysed it, but again, it's provided some information tools there to highlight where there's significant areas for seabirds. And that's not to say that other areas aren't important. There may be other areas that are important for feeding and for other purposes, but these were based on location close to colonies where birds are likely to be either using the water in large access colonies to go in and come out, or whether they're bathing or preening or rafting in adjacent areas to their colonies. So over to Jim.
I'm just going to try and do my best not to do an impression of the priest in Forwardings and Funeral. Right, so New Island, I'm going to talk all business and logistics, so a little bit about conservation, but not really. So obviously this is the first year marking the merger between NICT and Falklands Conservation. So it's been a really positive year for us and quite a lot of exciting developments. We've been looking at building on the infrastructure at New Island, and one of the key things we achieved this year was doing some critical work on the maintenance of the airstrip. As you know, most of you probably are aware that getting in and off New Island is quite a tricky affair sometimes. So we've that work went really well. We have maintained our status quo. We can still get the equivalent of 3 adults in and off currently. And hopefully if the areas that we maintained and the maintenance is continued, we will be able to maintain that as well as maybe moving forwards a bit. We've also been looking at improving infrastructure in terms of land-based tourism and for scientific researchers and just normal local and overseas tourists. COVID presented a lot of challenges. I'm sure we're all aware of them. One of the key challenges for New Ireland was that every year we have a lot of international researchers that have been doing long-term studies, and they were not able to come to the Falkland Islands. So where possible, local researchers stepped up and took on this long-term monitoring work with good success on the whole. One of the issues we've had to face is that we haven't had any cruise tourism for the 2020-21 year, which is the main financial revenue, or historically was the main financial revenue of New Ireland. The FIG trip scheme was a great assistance for us in this way because we were able to build our land-based tourism from locals up 334%. So that meant that our revenue stream from that was greatly increased, which was really helpful. The other key point that I think is really good about having locals being able to come to New Ireland and experience New Ireland, and also not just New Ireland, all around the Falklands, is that a lot of people who live here are not able or have not been able in the past historically to go to the islands, maybe for financial reasons or other reasons. And like the trip scheme really has, I think, made a huge difference to the local community to experience the wildlife that we have here. And all of the feedback I've had from people going to New Ireland, they really were quite blown away with the biodiversity on New Ireland, and they now have got quite a good understanding of the challenges that are facing the island, which is helpful for plans in the future. And there was some tussock planting that was achieved, which we were very grateful for the assistance from the environmental studies budget. And that is it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andy and Jenny. That's fabulous. All the work that you've been doing on those. And then we've got some we've got a couple of watch group members in the audience, which is great. Welcome. So this year, as the members would be able to tell you, they've been very busy as watch group members. Actually, last year you guys presented what the watch group wanted to see for their coming year, which was excellent. You've been out with Andy trying to look at what's happening out on Cape Pembroke, of what's happening with cats and native birds. You took the MLAs out to clean up round the tip, which was a lot of fun. And you've been very interested in what the new candidate MLAs were going to decide to do for the environment in the election. And actually, you fed in greatly into developing what has been an interesting green election, looking at restoration. Part of the watch group things was about planting things, stopping things coming in from outside, looking at management of the marine environment, and about climate change. We've talked a lot about climate change with the watch group, and then finally looking at how you can do other things. What are the things that can make a green economy here? So those are some of the ideas that the watch group have come up with or talked to us about, or we've worked together as our youth members with us. And we're going to try now to watch the little video that the watch group made. Let's see if that comes up here. We just need to try and get some volume. Come on. I have. Is this the point to do it?
I think the first question is how to use a laptop.
Thank you. Thank you, Grant.
By the time of 40, what would you have done to increase the use of clean energy? How many solar
Don't touch it.
wind turbines will we have? What would you do to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? How will you make more clean energy? By the time you're 16, 15, and 14, what will you have done to restore animal habitats? How many acres of peat will you have saved? Which animals will you have saved and how? How many more sectors will we have planted? How could we encourage more families to plant native plants on their lands? Marine management. By the time we are 16, what will we have done to stop throwing rubbish in the sea? How will we do this? How many whales will be saved? The ones in the sea, plus the other animals, plus the in the land to them. How to stop fishing? Don't throw rocks when there is a seal. Keep our seas free from liquid. What will you have done to stop invasive creatures from entering the Falkland Islands? How many eggs and chicks will have been saved? How many islands will be rat free? How will you reduce the carbon dioxide the country uses? What is the country doing to stop the ice caps melting? When will we start using renewable energy? If your family and friends will describe you as Falkland animal, which Falkland animal would they describe you as and why?
Well done, the watch through. Right, so coming on from now, we're now going to introduce Grant.
We don't like to follow that. We like children and animals. Yeah.
So, I'm just going to,
Just press that. Oh, sorry. This one.
just to get them all on, because
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I probably won't follow the bullet points exactly. That's us, I think. So I'm going to start at the bottom. I think Esther's been pretty generous in her appraisal, because I don't think anyone can class 24 management plans as a highlight of the year for anyone that's written them and anyone that's read them. It's probably fairly low on your list of highlights, but it is a necessary step. So we have gone through for all the land holdings, and we say 24. We have 23 offshore island sites and 1 onshore island site, the Lynn Blake Nature Reserve in West Falkland, and they haven't really been fully integrated into the organisation in the past. It's been a system of what you might call benevolent neglect. Let nature get on with it. So what we have done is, first of all, an assessment. What do we have on the islands? What are the priority species? What are the threats at each of these locations? How can we mitigate these threats to either maintain or improve the current situation? And then what are the work priorities to do that, and what are the funding implications? So it will help give a steer in the future to better the conservation status of these islands. So with that out of the way, we'll get on to the real highlights. Obviously, I think the tussock planting out on Middle and Motley, we did 10 days in total again this year. That was 6 days on Motley through the EU Best, and 4 days on Middle with Georgia Seafoods again. And I think that anyone that's been looking around to see if, I think, yes, there have been some. You know, I would hope it's hard work, but at the end of the day, you arrive there and what was once a great big black spot of eroding peat, you leave and it's dotted with green new plants. It really is that kind of satisfying on the ground conservation, which, you know, policy and lobbying is very important. It gives you that long-term benefit, but that instant gratification of saying, well, look, I've done this, I've really achieved this. So that's certainly a highlight. And we've been doing that with Frin. She's not here today, she's in the UK with a new baby, a new tiller. Yes, speaking on her before. And part of this work is actually the publicity. We also have Spring Creek, which works with us. And as part of the overall publicity that that's got, they have also committed to more funding, because it's not just us doing it, it's also the private landowners are doing it, the farmers are doing it. The small grant schemes can support fencing and plant costs for them, but that needs a source of funding. So Spring Creek has stepped into that gap and are providing that. And one which isn't on the list, which I would probably put down as a highlight, and it sounds maybe strange, standing conservation and saying that, but that's Farmers Week this year. For the first time, I think we had a joint presentation with Falklands Conservation, Falkland Islands Government, Department of Agriculture and farmers, all in the same panel, all presenting the same ideas. And whilst we're not all completely on the same page, there are different priorities. Everyone was coming in from their own particular direction and their own particular interest to look at land management in the Falklands, the problems of the drying climate, of wind erosion and other matters. So very often there's barriers up between these three groups, and in the past Farmers Week sometimes they were all there, but they were sitting in disparate groups on opposite sides of the room. So I think to see that this year with everyone actually doing a joint presentation was a major step forward. That's me.
Great, thank you very much, John. That's excellent. Now, Dave is going to try and ensure that it's not recording, but it needs to keep on recording, Dave, while you're speaking.
Just turn it off so we don't listen to that bit. It's just got to split it a bit, but it's about to start. There we go. And I know the memory card's about to run out, so it's all good. I want to tell you that the pot noodles are specifically for surveying invertebrates, but I do actually love pot noodles. I've been working on the Diamond Plus Peak Wetlands project for just shy of a year. I think my anniversary getting out of quarantine is next week. And the idea is that we're looking at some of the more vulnerable habitats in the Falklands and trying to pinpoint the ones that are pristine or near pristine, and often those are on islands. So we're looking at boxwood, grass onshore and offshore, and bluegrass. But the first year, really, the output was looking at a whitegrass project and going to farms like Cape Dolphin and a few others around Blue Beach and NPC, and trying to get an idea of the carbon, above ground carbon and soil carbon in a gradient of grazing from heavily grazed, moderately grazed and ungrazed. And we had to go to NPC to find the sites really that were ungrazed. You had one and another farm had one. So what came out of that really was things that we'd probably all expect. So where there was a higher grass sward, we were finding that there was a lot more moisture in the soil. And that gives us a way really, or Falkland land managers a way to manage the land better in a drying climate. And that to ensure that you can keep the moisture in the soil. So I know that you do certain things out there, Ben, that are doing really well, but maybe holistic farming, where you're keeping a high grass sward will help that. We've been out on lots of trips as well to, well, you can see the islands there. And that's been fantastic. Last week we ended up on North Island. I was attacked by a seal and nearly died in the tussock straight after. But it turned out to be a fantastic trip, and we was collecting data on the invertebrates, the soil, and we process the soil for carbon and moisture and pH. And we'll also be looking at the interrelationships between the species there, from the invertebrates, the birds, and the plant species as well, using a variety of methods, including quite large 200-metre square quadrats for the plants. And I think that's probably me. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to hand over to Pammy, who's going to represent all of us working in the shop and keeping all the finances going, with Mark as well.
Me, retail. Just to let you know that probably I will have like 10 slides of each single item in the shop. No, I'm kidding. Now, first of all, I want to thank everybody who goes to our shop or purchase our items online. That's a huge help, and I hope everybody's happy with their purchases. So our highlights for this year is definitely the database developed to streamline online orders. Actually, database was a big effort from staff members, at least in UK, and our trustees, to develop a better way to take care of you, our members. And now, thanks to that, everybody has a membership number, and you can also go online and renew your membership or purchase a new membership just by a click. And you can decide to go one payment or annually, all through your credit card. Amazing. So easy, so there's no excuses. And then also, for those who have been visiting us in our shop, we used to have a very old-fashioned till, which was very noisy, but it worked very well. But now we have a new square system set up, which is accepting credit card payments. It's very quiet and also allow us to follow with our stock items and do a little bit of stock take at the same time that you're doing purchases. So all that process that normally goes manually to a stock take, thanks to that square till, is way more easier. Thank you. And also we have had the 3rd edition of the Visitor's Guide. It was a joint effort led by the tourist board, and finally is with us in our shop. So if you guys would like to have a copy, please do visit us. You can buy it in our shop and also online, and it's lovely. And we have a partnership with the Big Wild Thought, which is a sustainable shop. You can buy items online in UK, and then we get a percentage donated to our organization. And also I would like to include that it's not there because it just arrived yesterday, our Mark Season's book. Mark Season make a donation for each book you sell or you buy. He makes a £1 donation to our organization. And if you want to purchase anything, we also have it in our shop. So please do go and visit us and enjoy a little tea or a chat with us as well.
Who and Mark and Pammy also do all the financials, everything that happens, all the behind scenes work, which is, as we all know, very, very hard work, and we really appreciate it. We couldn't do it without you. None of the other stuff could happen, so thank you. Great. So we just wanted to talk briefly about some other things in terms of partnerships and the community. As said, you know, you all are representative here of partnerships of the community in different ways. And we work closely with the Environment Department as well, as Land Care, Sally and Ken, and the MOD. Many of you in terms of for biosecurity. We had Sarah, who isn't here unfortunately tonight, but she's worked hard in contributing to the Wildlife Disease Working Group as well, which has been sort of identifying that when we've had pox and things like that happening out on the island, she's been contributing into that group and helping giving information. Grant's already kindly talked about Spring Creek Conservation and the fact that they have supported our small grants for the last couple of years, along with the Antarctic Research Trust. So that's been really key for getting finance out into the landholding community as well. And in terms of the community, we've got a lovely picture of Dave's behind in the PT Pals group. which is something that started by Frin and Dave and others in terms of bringing together lots of interested people about all things peat, which has been excellent. You can see a couple of people you recognise in that picture. We had the charity ball this year as well, which Sorrel, who isn't here, who created most of this presentation, so it's a real shame she couldn't make it, but she actually jumped into the shoes of Michelle, who moved on to work for Bass and took on the running of the charity ball at the last minute, which was much appreciated as well. And going out into the schools. So I think most of the people within the team have been out into the schools doing various things. Andy does nocturnal animals. Caroline goes and talks about whales and dolphins and various other talks within the school and the Kidney Island trips, etc. And it's really great to get the ideas from the young people during those trips as well into the schools. And so in terms of some of the other things, particularly that Sarah's been running as well, which is the Oiled Seabird Rehab Centre, which has been great in the last few years. We haven't had any oiled seabirds, which has been fabulous. And also, obviously, Helen Marsh, who isn't here tonight, unfortunately, but she is our volunteer curator who works running the herbarium, the National Herbarium. And the seabird monitoring programme, of course, Falkland Islands government supported seabird monitoring programme, which many of the team, Andy, Sarah, others who go out and help volunteer on that, have counted millions and thousands and zillions and willions of both the birds on the ground, then from pictures, and it's a huge bit of work, but it's continuing at pace. Right, so we're now going to, that was last year. So thank you all of you who have been involved in last year. We're now going to look ahead. So as an organisation, we have been looking ahead to the next 5 years. We are aware that as an organisation, we are, ambitious towards what we're expecting from government and from others. And so we are being ambitious with ourselves as well. So as a team, we've been looking at what we need to do to make a big difference as an organisation. We hope that we are making a difference, but we need to make a bigger one. So we're currently setting our targets on what that's going to mean across the organisation. Ooh, there we are. That was nice. So we're now in the green chunk. That means looking ahead. So we have, obviously, as an organisation, we have some challenges. We've been trying to build a new building for a few years now, but we've been doing well on our fundraising, but we're at the moment challenged by the international COVID sourcing of materials. So there are some delays, unfortunately, but we're still working towards that goal and hoping to get. We put out a tender, but we're hopefully going to be able to move ahead as soon as possible on that. New Island funding is a challenge in terms of the lack of cruise ships that we have been depending on. But as Jenny says, she's been working hard to try and fill beds in this last year. So obviously our own financial independence and turnover as an organisation is a constant challenge. As well as our own carbon budget. We recognise that, we've got to look inwards as well as outwards at how we're going to move forward with that over the coming year. And as well how how the community and we interact. So, got some lovely things that Sorrel's made here. We've got lots of things to focus on. I'm actually just going to mention one of these now, which is looking at the watch group. So we have a new watch group person, Glenn Welch, who'll be starting with us in January. So we're really excited that he'll be coming down. And through that, we're hoping that the watch group will be able to have an award scheme. It's something that we've wanted to do for many years, but have a way of recognising the work that you guys do over the years and have some badges and some awards that you can achieve through doing the sessions that you will be attending anyway as the watch group. So I just wanted to point out that that's just one of the things that we're looking to achieve. over the next 5 years with our wonderful youth membership. Following on from that, I'm going to hand over to Andy. So Andy has done a huge amount of legwork on looking at what we're going to achieve in the next 5 years. So anything more complicated, Andy talks to. I do the good things that all the children do the work on.
We get drafted into the dry stuff because apparently my personality suits it. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the other three sort of strands of our strategy that we're developing. So although it is quite dry, this is actually laying out hopefully all the exciting things we'll be talking about both next year and for the next 2, 3 and 4 years on. It's a 5-year strategy. Esther's talked about the kind of how we're going to position ourselves as an organisation to be stronger and more effective in terms of what we want to deliver. And then I've just got the 3 areas now that are going to talk about the more conservation focused elements about what we want to do. And they are restoring nature, a space for nature and using nature. And in short, that's trying to fix the bad things, trying to ensure that the good things remain good, and trying to make wise decisions in the future to save us putting ourselves in the pickle that we're in now 2 and 3 times over. So on to restoring nature, it's a huge global topic, restoration at the moment. It's been designated the decade of restoration, and the reason that the restoration is so important is it has two key benefits. One is that if you have habitats in good health, if you restore them to good health, then they're much more resilient to climate change. Climate change, just the climate crisis, is a huge factor going forward for us and the environment of the Falklands. And secondarily, some habitats, if they're in a bad state, are actually bad. They cause climate change problems. They can contribute to climate change, but if you put them in a healthy state, then they can contribute to climate change mitigation. And our Falklands peatlands are exactly that. If they're not healthy, they're going to contribute to climate change. They're going to emit carbon dioxide. If we can get them into healthy states, then they will start to capture carbon and keep it in the peat. And peat's a huge, very significant store of carbon. And so these are the challenges that face us really for restoration. Aside from habitat restoration specifically, you'll see we've also got invasive species, but we're aiming to look at reducing soil loss and erosion. We're looking to tackle invasive species, so invasive species such as rats and cats and mice, which all impact native habitats. And we're also looking to try and improve on those habitats we have. So restoration is not about just getting rid of the threats, but you can actually do things positively after you've got things into a good state. And that might be putting back native species that have been lost in the first place. So maybe reintroduction of cod wren to a place that's had rats or mice removed, for example. So we've got two strands to this. One is that we really want to work with landowners, government, anybody else to try and encourage, facilitate, help with restoration on their land. If we can do it through knowledge brokering or sharing information, if we can do it through support guidance or through volunteers or whatever, we want to really work with landowners to achieve wider scale restoration. And secondly, we want to work on our sites. As Grant said, we need to put ourselves in a position where we're looking after our sites in an appropriate way. We can't tell other people how they should be looking after theirs if we're not doing it ourselves. And so our restoration challenges that we see over the next 3 or 4 years that we want to achieve on is certainly to focus on New Ireland. It's an enormous site. It's a very significant site. It's a very valuable site. But one of the key challenges for New Ireland is the presence of invasive species. And New Ireland's got rats, cats, mice, and rabbits. And at least 3 of those, the rodents, well, the rats and mice and the cats, are globally recognised as species that do enormous amounts of damage to seabird populations, or indeed small birds, or and actual habitats as well. So in rats and mice do modify habitats through seed consumption. They slow down restoration rates or regeneration, so they can have a huge impact. Rabbits too also obviously modify habitats. So what we want to do is undertake a feasibility study. And it's really important. It's the first step, and I would stress it is a feasibility study. This is not doing anything on New Ireland specifically at this stage. We're going to undertake what is actually quite a lot of work to inform what trying to tackle these invasive species would take, what it would look like, what it would cost, how long it might take, when we may be able to do it, if we can do it, what the challenges may be. So that's one of the first steps for New Ireland at this stage, and we hope to take forward a feasibility study in the near future. Secondly, on New Ireland, it has its challenges too with regard to soil erosion and loss of vegetation. There are bare areas on New Ireland that we'd like to restore, but also for New Ireland, there are continuing challenges with regard to erosion risk and soil. There's a lot of Yorkshire fog. It was seeded in the past, and Yorkshire fog now has a tendency you can get rapid dieback on Yorkshire fog, so you can very quickly see areas of Yorkshire fog be killed off, and then the dead grass blows away, and so you suddenly end up with another area of bare earth. So we're very mindful of the fact that there is a lot to work out on New Ireland, and that we'll have large-scale restoration challenges on there. We need to scale up for that, and we need to prepare ourselves, and hopefully we'll be able to define an approach for getting these kind of things in place and achieved. And then finally, we want to carry on the great work that Grant talked about on Midland Motley. There are only other 2 sites of all the other sites we have that have got kind of ongoing and significant risk from erosion on any scale, and we want to continue to contribute to trying to tackle that erosion risk by planting up and getting the areas on these islands that are at risk restored. So that's another key restoration ambition for us. A space for nature. As I said, it's about recognising what is good and putting in place the appropriate kind of safeguarding. We want to safeguard the areas that are good, not damage them as well as some of the other areas. And so one of the ways to approach this is to put in place policy or protection, if that's legal protection, or to ensure that they're appropriately managed. The challenges for us is that there is a network of national nature reserves. It's a relatively small number. It's not consistently or strategically defined to cover any particular habitats or any particular species in any particular way. It doesn't offer particularly specific protection or legislation to achieve targets. And it's not, they weren't strategically chosen in order to provide a network of sites for populations to interact or to migrate between or anything like that. So there is a very, very early stage attempt at some kind of safeguarding of important spaces, but very little. And so we'd like to progress that. And secondarily, even more so, that there's absolutely no protection in the marine environment, no safeguarding for biodiversity at all. Specifically for biodiversity, and so we'd like to certainly see advancement of that and to be defining areas that can be safeguarded in combination with using globally accepted standards to provide that assurance that what people say they're going to do is going to be achieved. So there's 2 approaches again. We've got sites that we would like to see identified for further safeguarding and statutory designation, and then we want to work to try and advocate for better marine management, better standards of marine management. Now this is really Caroline's slide, but this is a next step in some of the marine work which we have, which I'm really pleased to say we already have funding for. So Caroline was absolutely critical in putting together another Darwin bid for us, and we've got another 3 years of work funded by Darwin, and the title of this project is Advancing Falklands and Regional Scale Management of Globally Important Whale Populations. But in short, it's another whale project, which is fantastic. It carries our work on cetaceans. It's going to increase our understanding of not only their movements in the inshore, but hopefully by using telemetry devices to see where the whales will go. We'll be able to track their movements potentially beyond the inshore environment and potentially further afield. We'll be able to establish better their habitat use and their foraging ecology. A lot of the work done thus far has been within the inshore through visual studies. This will allow us to see what the whales are doing when we can't see them beneath the waves and beyond the reaches of our boat. However, we will also be doing an aerial survey for southern rights. We've looked at sei whales in terms of their national distribution a bit, and we want to look again at whether we have southern right whales here as they've increased over the years in sufficient numbers to merit KBO designation for them. And it will also look at further work on photo identification and genetic sampling and tissue sampling, which is a continuation of the work that Caroline's been doing, that's been feeding a lot, again, as a much better understanding of the ecology of these animals. And it does come with its own boat. And I just say that as a throwaway comment because it's taken an inordinate amount of time and effort for Caroline to try and to get this organised. But yeah, so the project itself will, well, this is the boat, so we'll have a boat to undertake this work. So that's fantastic. It's a really exciting prospect to have this project kicking off, and that'll be starting this season, fingers crossed, COVID allowing, with every other kind of challenge that might be thrown away. But yeah, potentially to have some really, really exciting information and more stuff about the whales around the islands. The other areas about looking at sites for statutory designations, and there's two elements to that. One, we really want to encourage, again, government and other landowners that may be interested in terms of increasing the safeguarding for their own sites if they have valuable sites. We've a good example of this is Hill Cove recently. It's an amazing area, West Falkland, tens of thousands of hectares. It's not been grown for quite some time. It's botanically very, very valuable, and the landscape beauty is incredible. If anybody's not been up there, but it was a few months ago was talked about whether it was going to go back under grazing again. And so we just need to be sure that we identify these sites that are really important from a restoration perspective, from a climate change perspective. If we've got really good sites in recovering condition, it just seems very short-sighted to allow them to go back. These are some of the things that are very easy wins to do good stuff for both nationally and for climate change, and for people to access and see. So a national park designation for Hill Cove Mountains would be fantastic if we could get something like that. Destination of sites, FC sites. So we do own globally important sites for plants, FC Islands. Motley Island is amazing for plants, for example, and we've got sites that are part of globally important bird areas. So we'd really like to try and progress further protection for our sites as well, to ensure they're safeguarded in perpetuity, effectively. Using nature. Fundamentally, this is about, as I said, trying to make the right decisions in the future to avoid putting us in a bad place that we may have found ourselves in already with some of our habitats, some of our species, some of our approaches. And fundamentally, it's about environmental sustainability. It's about not adding pressures to our environment that's already under quite a number of threats and pressures, and will be under increasing pressure as time goes on through climate change. It's absolutely critical if there's to be a long-term future in terms of sustainable economy, and we need environmentally, the environment needs to be sustained because it underpins our economy fundamentally. So we want to see forward-looking approaches to environmentally sustainable development, not just taking things as they come, but proactive horizon scanning to see what options blue and green economies offer us, how we can develop the national economy to ensure that it's sustainable now, not only now, but in the long term. Leads a little bit back to front, actually. This refers to, come on. So one of the big topics for us regarding sustainability, not putting additional pressures on existing ecosystems, is we will continue to advocate against industrial scale open pen salmon farming. It's something that we've already been doing. We'll continue to do that because we feel that the risks and the pressures that could be put on our inshore environment are just too great, particularly at a time when it needs to be as robust as it can to deal with climate change. Secondarily, we'll run the Seabird monitoring programme. The Seabird monitoring programme provides us with a way to monitor the state of the oceans by using seabirds as a kind of indicator of where things are at. So we'll continue to do that, and that will allow us to track whether the marine environment is seeming to be in good health or in poorer health by the direction of travel of some of the key species that we monitor. So albatross, petrels, shags, penguins, all that have slightly different utilizations of the marine environment. And we're going to develop through Dave's project